What's up, gentlemen? Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, welcome to the channel. In this video, we are going to get into why moving to Bangkok, Thailand was the biggest mistake of my life. Now, that might be a little bit dramatic, but stick with me until the end so I can elaborate more on why I say that. But before we get into this very brief story, smash the like button, costs you nothing, means the world to me, really helps me out with the algorithm, and consider subscribing if you choose to do so. So, with all that said, let's go ahead and get into the story of how I ended up in Bangkok, Thailand, and why it has ruined my life. So, first and foremost, about, 10 years ago or so, I went to Bangkok for the first time. As a matter of fact, it was my first solo trip ever, and there are a number of reasons for that. Now, I do want to point out that it wasn't like the first foreign country I've been to. Obviously, growing up, I went to places in Latin America, Jamaica, Bahamas, the Caribbean, and so on and so forth. But for my first solo trip, I chose to go to Bangkok, Thailand. And for a little bit of context, I was living in San Diego, California at the time, in Little Italy. Okay? And so I chose to hop on a plane, go across the world, completely different culture on a whim. And part of this is because I wanted to get scuba certified, and it's dirt cheap in Thailand. And I wanted to do some Muay Thai kickboxing and a little bit of jiu-jitsu over there. And I knew there was great food, and I knew it was super affordable. And so I hopped my jolly black ass on that plane and flew across the world. And to my surprise, I get off the plane, I land, everything is going perfectly smoothly. English, not that hard to come by. Plenty of people, in my experience, spoke English. And so my journey in Thailand has now begun. And you may know, like if you've been overseas, especially your first trip, especially if it goes good, it kind of remains near and dear to your heart. You're kind of like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, especially if it's your first experience and it's not like a garbage experience, right? And so I'm going to my Airbnb and the pictures look great or whatever. And I show up to my Airbnb and it is even better than I expected. So I get there and it is a high rise, right? And I wasn't paying that much per night. And it was way nicer than my place in Little Italy in California. And I was like, that's interesting to me. Because my place in Little Italy was not cheap. Like, it was pretty expensive, especially for what it was. And I mean, this place had 2 infinity pools. It had like a little convenience store, which wasn't like super important. The technology was super great. The elevators were super fast, face recognition, all kinds of things that really, really impressed me. And the building was super impressive overall, obviously. And I was like, wow, this is interesting. And that was the first time I took note that, maybe I could actually live in a place like this. And then as time went on, the boy went out and about, went exploring, saw different parts of Bangkok, saw different parts of Thailand, because obviously I had to go to the islands to get scuba certified, and that is also where one of the jiu-jitsu places was. And once again, getting scuba certified, fairly inexpensive. Jiu-jitsu, fairly inexpensive. Muay Thai, especially with a private trainer, fairly inexpensive. And at this point, I should note that I was making money online, okay? So that was another consideration for me. Obviously, if you aren't making money online, or you don't have a remote job, then that throws a different wrench into this equation, okay? So I'm taking note of all this stuff, hopping around, visiting different places, and I go back to Bangkok. And then in Bangkok, I go to some fairly nice restaurants and fairly nice clubs and things of that nature. And I can't help but compare it to the cost of what this would be in San Diego, which, especially back then, almost 8 years ago or something like that, 10 years ago, I was like, I am being charged an arm and a leg for everything in San Diego, California, which not like super surprising, but it does become somewhat noticeable. And so, looping back to being an online business owner, it became apparent to me that, look, I could move from San Diego to Thailand, have a higher quality of life. I mean, I didn't even get into the fact that I was pretty much getting normal massages, you freaky boys, pretty much every other day following like training. And they were like, $5 for an hour deep tissue massage. Not even joking. All right. So it was absolutely insane. And then at a certain point, I had like a maid and all kinds of stuff. But anyway, so I was like, I could live here, have a higher quality of life, can pretty much live like a king, and, have everything I need. So reduce my cost, get more for my money, and I could put more money back into my business, because obviously if you lower all your cost of living goes down, which means you don't need to take as much money out of business. And that means you can put that money back into the business, whether that is hiring better talent, attracting better talent. Maybe it's advertising. Maybe it's introducing new systems. Maybe it's for innovation. Doesn't matter. And so that trip that was planned for something like, I don't know, 30 days or something like that, maybe not even that, turned into months upon months. And at the time, I was utilizing like border hopping essentially before looking into the different types of legitimate long-term visas. And obviously 8-10 years ago, whatever it was, the visa options were much different back then. I think there was like a language visa, an education visa, and the education visa is actually the one I got started on. And that's because I was doing Muay Thai. And if you go to like a proper Muay Thai school, you can get the education visa. Or you could, back then, I don't know how it is now. You could get the education visa for that. And then there is like the language visa, which maybe I already hit on. But once again, I'm not sure on any of the validity of this in the modern day, because this was, almost 10 years ago or something like that. But before I ended up getting the long-term visa, I went back to the United States for a variety of reasons. In fact, I was in Thailand and I was, spending all this money on my place back in the United States. And I had to figure out, am I actually going to uproot my life in San Diego, California, and move to Thailand? Because I was paying a decent amount of money for rent in a place that I wasn't living in, essentially, for months at that point in time. And so I had to go back to the States and figure out, okay, when my lease is up, what am I going to do with all this stuff in my apartment? Am I sure I actually want to make this change? And these are all things I was thinking before I actually landed. And so I landed in California, or in San Diego, I should say. And if you know the San Diego airport, beautiful airport, by the way, right on the water. And I'm on my way back to my place in Little Italy, not that far from the airport, okay? And so I just remember getting to my building and being like, yeah, this isn't it. I need to get back to Thailand as soon as possible. And so I had to wait out my lease. Well, I guess I didn't have to, but I had some other loose ends I had to close up. I wanted to see some family because who knows when I would be able to see them again back then. Because, it's an extremely long flight from LA or San Diego or San Francisco or what may have you to Bangkok, Thailand. And that brings me to the whole point of this video. Whenever I go places now, I essentially compare that place on a value spectrum to a place like Bangkok, Thailand. You could probably even say like Kuala Lumpur, which is another place that I've been to and pretty comparable to Bangkok on a value perspective. Probably not as great of a city, in my opinion, for my wants and needs. Shout out Drake, as Bangkok. I think Bangkok is probably one of the most value forward, value heavy, high value cities in the world. Just so much bang for your buck. But the issue is that since that was my very first solo travel experience, if I'm looking at another place for long-term reasons, it has kind of diluted me towards other places because you just get so much more value. You have great food. It's called the Land of Smiles for a reason. People are friendly, welcoming. Now, they won't necessarily see you as a Thai person, which we aren't going to get into for the purpose of that video. And don't get me wrong, there are definitely issues with Thailand and Bangkok and so on and so forth. Like, it is not perfect, but no city anywhere in the world is perfect. But like when I come to a place like I'm in Warsaw, Poland right now, I've been staying in 5-star hotels. And frankly, what you get in a 5-star hotel here is not that much value for your money in comparison to what you could get in just like a mid-range kind of luxurious apartment building in Bangkok, Thailand for a fraction of the cost. In fact, this is one of the problems I had with Colombia. So in Colombia, and I also live in Mexico, and it is kind of the same thing. Like, you can get value for your money, but it's not nearly as close to what you would get in Southeast Asia. So Colombia, for example, you have Poblado, which is like the nice area, or El Tesoro, nice area. And in those buildings, first of all, they're not that nice. And they are getting increasingly more expensive, especially in the modern day. And you simply just don't get that much value. Now, if Bangkok was, or I shouldn't even say Bangkok. Now, if Southeast Asia wasn't my first experience and I only knew of Colombia, then I would probably think, wow, this is really great value for your money, especially coming from San Diego. Because in comparison to San Diego, yeah, Colombia, much more affordable, and there are great options there. But the great options probably, in my experience, gonna run you, I don't know, let's say $1,500 a month. And I'm talking for like high tech, high quality, which high tech, kind of hard to find in Poblado or in Colombia. Multiple, just one infinity pool kind of thing. Probably is going to run you about $1,500 a month. Whereas, same thing, Southeast Asia, probably half of that. And so, being in Thailand, living there, has completely diluted my view of value for your money to a negative extent that wherever I go in the world, it is really hard to find a place that matches Southeast Asia on a value proposition. And so I have to remind myself when I go places, wow, you can't just compare places to Southeast Asia because that is a ridiculously high bar to set. I have to remind myself that, hey, think about the negatives in places like Bangkok and places like Kuala Lumpur, which don't have many, but they do have quite a few. The rain, the heat, the air quality, so on and so forth. And also, these are big cities and all kinds of things like that. And so when I go to a place, I don't know, like Greece, I have to reorient how I view that place because Greece, not going to be nearly as modern, right? But a lot more history to offer, really good food. And all these places have other things to offer, but for me, I'm always looking at the value. And so when I go, if I spend 1,500 a month in Greece, what can I get for that? But with that same 1,500 in Bangkok, it's like, wow, it is really hard to compete with a place like Bangkok. All right, so that's going to wrap up this video. Thank you for watching. Leave your comments down below. Smash the like button on your way out of here if you haven't done so already. And I will see you guys in the next video. And as always, peace, much love.